It's Steph. Hope you're doing well. Good morning to everybody over here in the grandiose continent of North America, and hello, everyone, to the welfare-addicted vassal states of American imperialism known as Europe. Welcome. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you're bracing for a chilly winter. But hey, I'm not doing politics anymore, so that's just a little flyby. So if you have questions, issues, comments, criticisms, and listen, I really do want to thank the fellow who called in a couple of weeks ago for the metaphysics debate.
Thank you, Mr. Philosopher.
It's got my brain cooking, and in fact, yesterday,
It's got his brain cooking. Now it's like, why wouldn't you give the guy who has apparently spurred something in you? Why wouldn't you give him credit rather than in sort of a serious and sort of appreciative fashion, rather than saying it's got my brain cooking, right? It's like it's sort of it takes things down to the lowest common denominator, and even maybe further down is sort of a slight attempt at dismissing you, right? Sort of a gaslighting, passive aggressive way of dismissing you, right? It got my brain cooking. I have to step up in order to be better at confronting these widows, right? It's sort of between the lines. It doesn't say things sort of straight up, right? Which I think would be a good characteristic of a good philosopher, a decent philosopher. This sort of loose language might have its justification here and there, but when you're dealing with important things and other people's participation in your philosophy, I personally would show a bit more sort of let's say appreciativeness and directness in saying it straight up, right, rather than this fluffy language. Now, this is also why I think one way of derailing a discussion is trying to provoke the other part, right? Trying to provoke them into getting angry or something like that, and then pointing out, you're getting angry, I can't discuss with you, right? And then get rid of the discussion this way. And it seems to me that this is very often what is maybe going on, more or less, consciously, you could say, right? But just get these strange notions about his language and the way he sort of uses sort of when he starts this show, it's like good morning, and so sort of rather than being sort of straight up calm and connected, right? It's just weird why he thinks he needs to do this. And there's one explanation to me could be that he's sort of trying to, sort of he feels you have to talk down to people, in not because you sort of try to dominate them, but because they're stupid, right? They need to have it in this kindergarten fashion in order to engage them, right? So, okay, let's go on.
I wrote an essay on metaphysics that blew my own mind.
Oh, it blew my own mind. I'm simply so great. I'm surprised how great I am. Even I am surprised about my greatness, right? Holy man, holy, I'm sort of. It's a recurring theme when he's done something. When his books are they're so fantastic, they're great, and his philosophy is great. Everything's perfect. I'm astonished by my own writing. I'm the picture of greatness, right? Okay, well, if you need to tell people that you're great, it might be because you actually don't believe that you're great, right? Because let them tell you that you're great then, right? Let them be the judge of your greatness. I don't want. I mean, if people are telling me the author of something, or you know, I'm you should read this book because I wrote it and I think it's great. I was like, no thanks, right? No thanks.
It's a pretty wild place to be in my head, as you can imagine. There's a lot of horses, most of them running in the same direction, some of them going in different directions.
There's a lot of horses running in different directions, some in the same direction, something like that. So now we're going to this sort of weird metaphor land, right? So he's trying not to be concrete. He's trying to avoid being rigid, right? Because if you're rigid, then things have to hang together in a string of arguments, right? Apparently he's trying to avoid that, right? And why would you want to avoid that? Because you can't create this string of good arguments, right?
And it's a really fantastic essay.
It's brilliant, man. It's pure philosophical gold, man. It's another grail. It's the seventh grail I've found. I found all the grails in the universe, right? I'm great, man. I'm fucking good. So great. He's so full of himself, right? Oh, it's a turn off.
And I hope that you will check it out. I'll probably publish it later today. Maybe read it as a show, but it's really something to explain.
Okay, so if we publish this on like Odysee or BitChute and these Rumble and so on places, and he says he's going is he publishing on locals or on free domain or I don't know. Please, if you see this essay on metaphysics somewhere, would you please help me get a hold of it so that if it's behind some paywall or something like that, I might be interested in. And if I have to pay, okay, I guess I'll have to pay, right? I'll pay a minimum wage there. So I can deconstruct that. I think it's a good idea to hold this talk here apart from a potential deconstruction of this so-called essay. So leave it for that, right? So I'll make another deconstruction of that later. So this is enough for me to, rant on for a couple of hours at least.
Exactly why this Cartesian demon puts your brain in a tank, manipulates all of your senses.
Okay, so now he's framing it, right? He's trying to tell his listeners this is what they're trying to say. He is making interpretations about what was talked about. It's because people are sufficiently confused by his way of arguing. He's basically throwing monkey shit at me for an hour in order to get rid of me. And then people are leaning back and think, okay, what was going on in that metaphysics debate? I guess I'll have to keep coming back to Stefan Molyneux and give him money in order for me to get an understanding. And then he's sitting here framing what was going on, right? He told me very specifically, I shouldn't interpret what he was saying. I should repeat back to him exactly word for word what he was saying. Otherwise, I was not interested in his argument, right? After he has been rambling for 20 minutes or something like that, right? In order to, smoke screen me away from his debate. And here he is interpreting left and right, straw man after straw man. I mean, there's basically nothing in what he's saying here, and I've listened to this a couple of times during the last couple of days, so I know what I'm heading into, right? There is basically no understanding of the problem I was trying to point out, right? He simply doesn't get it. He is. There's a wall between this problem and his understanding, right? And that we will get back to it, and it will be, if I couldn't express myself, it will become more clear in the coming minutes here in this video deconstruction that he doesn't understand this, right? There's sort of a between the lines, a frustration maybe, right? That he doesn't understand what I mean, But in order to understand what is going on with this metaphysics debate, he has to label people as crazy bastards who are out to destroy his world, right? This is the only explanation, because he has to have an explanation. It can't be about philosophy because he has settled it. He's perfect, right? So there must be something about these people coming to asking questions about these particular things that is because they're out there, they're crazy, they had weird childhoods and so on, right? And they're trying to destroy him, right? They're trying to, undermine his reality, whatever, right?
To produce a simulacrum of reality, matrix style, why that exists, what it's for, and it's a pretty.
Why we mentioned that this Cartesian, I was not talking about Cartesian demons, right? There might be aspects of the problem I'm trying to get to that has similarities to Descartes', cogito statements, right? But, or the demon thought experiment, whatever, right? Which is a thought experiment. It's not an explanation, you moron, right? And I'm possibly going to be triggered a lot during this and going to, out on a limb, because it's unbelievably. And the more I deconstruct Stefan Molyneux, right, the more I realize what a lousy philosopher he is, right? And at the same time, he thinks he's so great, but it's because he is distancing himself from anybody who can actually, maybe, by some ping pong discussion, help him advance his philosophy to the next level, so to say, right? So it's like he pushes people away who could actually help him, and then he draws people in who are sort of only there to sort of lick his ass and feel that he explains libertarianism and Christianity and everything is one big pile, right? So it's sort of a freak show of some kind, this philosophy has got going, right?
Well, thesis. I think it's a valid hypothesis, and you can, of course, let me know what your thoughts are. But
is it a hypothesis? You don't use terms like hypotheses in metaphysics, right? Hypotheses are claims or attempts at approaching knowledge using reasoning and evidence, right? I have a hypothesis that space is, distorted, and that creates, gravity around planets, whatever, right? That's a theory based on the evidence and, some abstractions and so on, right? And then you could go out and measure that in order to, does it seem, what's the word, reasonable or something like that, right? That's a hypothesis. Hypotheses are about that reality. You are trying to point out how you approach by using metaphysics, right? So you're putting the cart before the horse by taking something that you use when you have established metaphysics in order to explain metaphysics, right? That's the same problem with using the term true and knowledge in metaphysics. It's a violation of fundamental philosophical structures, you can say, or what do you do in what order do you do things in order to get through the steps you sort of traditionally need to do in order to do good rigid philosophy all the way to a moral principle, right? So metaphysics, epistemology, I would say objectivity, then ethics, and so on, right?
Been debating this stuff for 40 years, off and on, and I think I finally cracked the nut.
Oh, now you cracked the nut. But, when you wrote the book, UPB, you didn't think you needed to write anything about metaphysics or epistemology, anything like that. In fact, you wrote in the book, well, I don't need to prove that murder is wrong. So you basically say, I actually don't need to do anything philosophy, right? It's out of 40 years, and then I called you a couple of weeks ago, and then I finally fixed it. I got it. Another holy grail, right?
Why it exists at all, and it's really a pretty wild thing, pretty wild argument. So I hope that you will.
Pretty wild argument? That rubs me the wrong way, right? It's a pretty wild argument. So it's sort of grooming the listener into, okay, so if you don't really understand what I'm saying, it's because it's wild and new, and oh, I'm constructing some new thing that you might not understand because you're a little person, right? So it's a wild argument, right?
Check it out. And it kind of came from an idea or an issue, which is that it bothers me immensely. It bothers me in a very foundational lizard brain, gut twisted kind of way. That philosophy just hasn't solved this problem. This problem has been going on for thousands of years. What is real, man? Could all just be an illusion, man. Our solar system could just be an atom in the.
No, it's not what is real. Yeah, it might be a figure of speech and how you put the words and so on. No, it's what do you mean by real, right? Do you mean the colors? Do you mean the concepts? Do you mean your stomach ache? Do you mean your feeling of hunger or sadness? What are you referring to? What are you basing it on? When you say this is real, you can't just say this is real. What are you referring to? Because you are inside your own experience. You can't hand out your experiences to someone else and say this is what I mean, right? You have to verbally explain what you mean. And that is one of the contents of metaphysics is when you're referring to something, whatever, you need to anchor it in something, right? And that something, ultimately, in my opinion, is what I call the reduction base. You might use some other term, right? A blank slate, the starting point. The blank slate is where the reduction base is lying on, right? So if you're starting with a blank slate, the first thing you have to do then is put on the reduction base, which is the foundation on which everything else is based, right? And whenever you refer to something else than a reduction base, you should be able to trace back to the reduction base that which you have explained up here. And that's why I'm saying all the arguments have to hang together all the way through your philosophy so you can get back to that reduction base without problems, without any leaps or whatever. Not just like violating Hume's Isard gap, right? That's why Hume says you can't do this kind of arguing because you're just jumping into whatever you want, right? It has to hang together. And you can't just mumble around words in order to make this. Maybe you can convince people that it's good arguing, but that's what the good philosophers should point out. No, you're arguing in a way that is incorrect. You are making leaps. You can, whatever, right? And that's where sort of the skepticism come into things. No, you're making a leap you can't do. You're making an incorrect leap or a fallacy over there, or it's disconnected from the reduction base. All these things that you should point out in philosophy. They said, okay, back to the drawing board. Start with the fresh, right? Start with a blank slate. So I'm sort of looking forward to what this. I don't have high hopes. Let me say that, judging from my previous deconstructions of this dude, right? That is going to be, but I'll give him the chance, right? And being the guy who actually spurred his idea of actually sitting down and writing something, which I would say I appreciate, right? Both that he says it's about this guy that spurred my idea. He doesn't give me credit for any kind of philosophy, I suppose, right? Let's see. But he doesn't say that in this. He doesn't say, and he said this, and he made that argument, and that made me think something like that. No, it sounds more like, well, this idiot made me realize I really have to solidify my own philosophy because they're crazy. Some more like that, right? So I thought I got out on a limb here, right? But back on track. Let's see what he says.
Couch of some divine being. You just don't know, man. How do you know what's true? Like the fact that we haven't solved this problem really bothers me.
What problem? So what I'm hearing is you're basically saying there is no problem to solve. You have this reality and it's given to you. What are you babbling on about? Why are you skeptical about it? Why are you? What is it about this philosophy that makes people say, well, what do you mean? Or what is reality? You're sitting there in your sofa and saying, I have it all. There are galaxies and there are cats and there are tomatoes and, bicycles and ice cream and, whatever. It's all there, right? What are you in doubt about? You must be crazy, man, right? It's because you don't get the fucking paradox I was trying to pound into your face when I discussed with you, right? It's like I threw it directly in your face and you didn't even identify it, right? You were unable to register this, even when I fucking tried to repeatedly tell it to you, right? And then you're going back into your sort of preconceived ideas about these crazy people are trying to, destroy my reality, and you have to repeat back to me, and how do you eat, and how do you know that it's food, and no, man, right? Okay, so let me explain as clearly as I can the problem that you face in your metaphysics, at least as I understand it and the way you have presented it previously, and how you try to argue for it during the debate, and various other bits and pieces I've heard from you, right? And I have to say bits and pieces because you're never very coherent in the way you either write philosophy or the rambling you're doing in these kinds of videos, right? So it is bits and pieces, right? And maybe that's why you can't understand your own books when rationality rules point out the major, argument in your book for your UPB, and then you can say, it's so long ago I wrote it, I don't know anything about it, I have to have it in front of me. So something like that, right? So, yes. If we start from the blank slate, right? Then choosing some kind of reduction base that makes sense to me, right? Makes sense. Maybe that should be a pointer, right? If I sit down and just shut the fuck up and just, try to describe what is going on, there are sort of colors, there are sounds, potentially, not always, right? Not always at all times and so on, but I hear the summing of my the cooler in my laptop, and I hear some birds outside, right? There's some light, there's some colors, there's shapes that I identify, and so on, right? And then I have a slightly I kicked my foot earlier today, but I was almost falling down the stair because I was stupid, right? And I can feel that ache in my toe or in the side of my toe, right? And I'm slightly sweaty because I've been sitting around all day doing work. I work from home, right? So I'm sort of slightly uncomfortable, slightly sweaty, sort of, sitting inside, and maybe I should open the window a little more, right? But so these are experiences, you can say, if you want to label them as one thing. It was encompassing. I'm not experiencing experiences, but I am labeling all that as experiences, right? I have experiences, colors, sounds, taste, feels, and smells, right? And then there are some other things like I'm thinking about this. I'm sort of aware that I'm not only there are colors, but I'm aware of the colors, right? You could say it's sort of a shady or a foggy kind of thing. It's not as strong as experiencing. There are little pictures of cherries on this canteen water bottle, right? They're very, very sort of they're high vivacity or strong experience, right? Rather than the awareness of it is more like I feel that I'm sort of have a focus or something like that, But let's just there might be something there. Let's just keep it aside. There's an awareness. There are sort of emotions like hunger or pain. Or pain might not be an emotion or feeling. Well, you could discuss the labels you put on it, right? But this is what there is, basically, to me, right? I find that to be a good foundation, right? So, and I think there's a dichotomy between those that are colors, taste, sounds, smells, and feels, right? Or touch, I don't know, is that what it's called? And then the other things that are sort of, seems to be things that are more internal than external, something like that, right? I'm not going to label that way yet, but there seems to be a difference. So I might maybe put them in two camps, right? Okay, so if I start by, no, just removing everything else but the sounds and the tastes and the feels and the smells and so on, then if I'm looking at that, right? How is that experience? Well, there seems to be spatiality to it, right? There seems to be, when I have a sort of an ability to, for instance, do this when I am aware of my arm, and I can say, I want to move this arm back and forth, right? Okay, so now it's moving back and forth. So there seems to be, there's something that I control with my, with my will or my mind, again, my experience, right? My awareness or something like that, right? So it quickly becomes quite complicated to deal with these things, right? And maybe this is a lousy attempt to do it, but let me try anyway, right? Now, when I have this spatiality, when I do this with my eyes, close them, open, close, open and close, do this, right? This hand disappears, the colors of that hand disappears, and when I do what I would call open my eyes, suddenly there's the hand again. So there seems to be something I control between my hand and my experience of my hand, right? That's sort of, there's something going on there, right? And what I'm tempted to say is, my hand is outside my experience, right? I'm tempted to say this, what I call hand, this experience here, is outside my experience. Because if I close my eyes, that experience, where that experience is, disappears. So there's something I can do between the hand and the experience of the hand that can either make it appear and disappear, right? There's no promise that it will reappear, but and then if I decide to make it disappear and it disappears, okay, then I can say it disappeared. And if I open my eyes and it reappears, I can say it reappears, right? So there's some spatiality to it. So I'm tempted to say that my hand is outside my mind, right? This hand is outside my mind. Now, that's where the problem is. That's why when you make that, when you're tempted to say that, right? Because there's nothing about this in the experience that says that this or anything else in that experience is in something you call an outside, right? That's not given to you, right? There's nothing that is given. That's why you need that blank slate and so on. No, nothing is given. I'm starting from scratch, working my way up and so on, right? So when I say this hand, if I say that hand is outside my experience, or, usually I would say it's outside my head, outside my mind, but I just sort of labeled my mind and my experience that encompasses all those experiences. So if I'm sort of putting an umbrella around it, saying that's where it is. So I wouldn't have to do that if I weren't attempting to make that external leap or outside leap about my hand. But as soon as I do that, I feel that my head is here, right? And this is where my those things that I call my eyes is also placed. So my where the experience of the hand is might be on the other side of the eye, and the hand is on the opposite side of that, right? So if I can make that experience disappear by closing my eyes, then the hand must be on the other side of that eye. And if I say my experience is on the opposite side of that eye, then they are disconnected in some way or another. But then the problem is, and I'm getting to it, right? How the hell can I experience it outside if it needs to be inside my mind in order to experience it? Am I not violating something by saying it's outside, right? It can't be outside if it needs to be in here in order for me to experience it, right? So is it my statement, my temptation in order to say that it's outside that is incorrect? Or is there something wrong with my experience of what the hell is going on? Well, one way to deal with it is, at least first of all, you need to identify it, right? If you're a good philosopher, you identify this. And that's what, guy like, maybe Socrates, I'm open to discussion whether or not Socrates actually identified the problem. I think that's what he was trying to tell Plato in the cave analogy, right? But, that's just my guess, right? But at least Immanuel Kant pointed this out. And maybe David Hume was actually on the right track. And that Hume was the guy who actually was a big influence on Immanuel Kant, as far as I understand, right? That you can't get to that outside, right? That's one explanation. One way of explaining it is to say, yes, you have that experience, right? In order for you to, in the first place, talk about your hand, it needs to have first become an experience that you then talk about and then place outside as if it came from that, right? But in order for you to be able to experience it, had to go through your eyes, go into experience, and then become an experience. But then when it is an experience, then it's no longer that outside, right? So in order to, I'm rambling a bit, right? But, it's sort of on the fly, this one, right? You say, that experience I have can at most be, or this is axiomatically stated, because you can't argue your way to it. You can't reason your way to it. You have to state, this is an axiom I'm working from. That outside I do not have access to. I only have access to a representation of it the mind creates based on this, whatever comes in through these senses, right? And what I call the senses are also mental representations of something I do not have access to. I just call it senses, those experiences of those things I call the senses, right? So when people say you are not experiencing the real world, what they're referring to is that inaccessible version of that which you have an experience of, right? That's what in Kant's philosophy he himself referred to as a Copernican turnaround or something like that, right? When instead of you going around, or instead of the sun going around you, you are going around the sun instead. Sort of the same kind of turning over the thing, right? While you think you have access to the actual thing, Kant is saying, no, you have access to an experience of the thing, right? But you don't have access to the actual thing. You can't, because you need that experience before you have any idea of anything. There's another point that you need to understand when you are, if you accept this explanation, right? This is my explanation. It's not mine. I didn't come up with it, but that's the one I'm going with, right? That you never had any idea of what's going on out there. Because if all you had ever was experiences, then you never knew what the experience is trying to tell you about, right? That's a logical leap you need to take also, in my opinion. So how does the mind know what the hell it's doing? Well, the answer is very simple. It doesn't. But whatever it does works towards some end, which could be survival, right? Survival is a description, but it's sort of, plausible, right? So, okay. This is one way of approaching this explanation I'm going with, right? And I we never got that far into this discussion. I think I actually did a pretty decent job, all things considered, and the way he behaved and tried to derail the discussion and provoke me and all sorts of things, right? But I kept calm and tried to get back to this explanation as good as I could, as well as I could, right? So if you understand this, what I'm trying to say, you will understand why I, say various things as we head on further into this thing here.
One of the main reasons it bothers me is that my daughter solved this problem when she was 3 or 4 months old.
But what problem? Is it a problem? But the way you put it forth, there isn't any problem. You're saying They are identifying a problem that isn't there. That's what I'm hearing, right? Now it's a figure of speech, okay, but she what you might be trying to say is she identified that there isn't a problem, right? And how would she? She wouldn't be helped by you. And I will also say this kind of metaphysics, don't inflict it on children, right? Because they are going to be rattled by it, right? You need to be a grown up who can handle these things, and that might also be a problem because when you're grown up, you have been accustomed to all sorts of preconceived ideas of how things should be understood. So maybe this is one of the problems with this kind of philosophy because it takes an imaginary leap to get there, right? Or maybe not imaginary. Maybe it's rather you need to be able to let go of what your habitual thinking. And if you don't know there's something there, why would you try to go there, right? Maybe that's what also a part of his thinking is. There's nothing to. It's crazy talk. Why are you heading that direction? Go in the right direction, right? Not identifying this problem. Try to point out that so he's never going to get it, right? Unless by some weird coincidence or whatever, the penny drops for him, right?
Is it too much to ask? Apparently it is. But is it too much to ask that philosophy, the big brain, giant brain philosophers, could solve a problem that...
But she doesn't understand this core problem, and you don't understand it either. So don't involve your child in this, right? Don't involve your child in these kind of discussion as if she's some magical child or something like that, right? Maybe that's not what you're doing. But anyway, it's because you don't understand the significance of what they're trying to tell you. Some of them might be crazy. I mean, there are lots of Christians and all sorts of woo-woo shit, people calling themselves idealists, who don't understand the significance of how you need to approach this. What they do wrong, in my opinion, most of these idealists, right, is that thing you do not, according to my stance here, right, do not have access to. They start to fabulate about what that actually is and what it might be and so on, because they can go out there and say whatever they want because nobody can go and check, right? So that's where God is, and that's where, usually all the gods and all sorts of, weird stuff that they can come up with as they please, right? It's sort of a free for all and free for anybody kind of. You can fabulate whatever you want. There could be goats as far as the eye can see, or something like that. Or as far as the eye can't see, right? I should say. So it's sort of a fairy tale land. And it's like, oh, I can go and say whatever I want. Okay, so all my confirmation bias, I can put in there. And then the mummies, gods and all that, they're suddenly there, right? So that's the problem with idealism. People want to go out in that thing you don't have access to and fabulate about what is there, right? But they can't. They can fabulate, but it's just fabulation. It's just sophistry. It's just words manipulation. Every time, if you deconstruct these idealists who go and say, now I'm going to tell you about what is there, it's all word manipulation. All the time, right? I've never seen anybody argue in a rigid fashion where they can connect with this reduction base, right? It's always disconnected from the reduction base. And that's why I say experiences are the most important thing you have. That's what you hang on to, right? If what a philosopher claims cannot be traced very clearly back to this reduction base, reject it. Or that's what I'm doing. If you have a different reduction base, okay, let's hear about it, right? But I think the sense is, when we're talking about that potential outside that people tend to refer to also as objective reality and all these terms used, right? Then it has to be traceable back to your reduction base. If it can't, reject it, right? That's why it's there. That's why you have chosen it, right? In order to avoid all sorts of weirdo academic bullshit, right?
A toddler a couple of months old can solve. Is that too much to ask? Apparently it is.
Yeah, but a toddler can stuff his face or her face with, apple pie, whatever, right? That doesn't mean that they have solved the biggest problem in philosophy. You framing it this way tells everybody that you don't understand the significance of this question. You haven't gotten it, right? You think it's just like saying, that's reality, so shut up, right?
Is it too much to ask that giant-brained, well-tenured, paid by society millions and millions and millions of dollars a year to protect and guard the frontiers and borders between truth and delusion? Is it too much to ask?
By truth and delusion, now you're mixing things up again, right? Metaphysics and truth has nothing to do with each other. You don't mention the term truth in metaphysics. That's when you're doing epistemology, right? It's not about truth, right? Truth is a conclusion about a proposition, about that reality you need to establish using your metaphysics, right? How do you approach knowledge when you have established what you mean by this reality?
That philosophers could solve a problem that is solved by apes, that is solved by squirrels, that is solved by lizards, that is solved...
How do you know what the hell is going on in lizards, right? Why are so, now we are jumping from, I have some experiences, and now there are lizards, and there are daughters, and there are all sorts of things, and academics, and that's not metaphysics. I know this is just a ramble video, so it's not necessarily coherent philosophy. But when are you going to do that coherent philosophy? Because it's always this rambling shit, right? Maybe, this essay is going to crack it. I don't have high hopes, let me say that at once, right? But, who knows? Maybe it's got something, right, that is actually coherent and based on a reduction base or a blank slate or something like that, right?
By amphibians, that is solved by all the way down to single-celled organisms.
So because amphibians can stuff things in their face that might help them prolong their existence, then they have solved the biggest problem of philosophy? No. The problem with this is you haven't identified, as I said numerous times now, you haven't identified what is significant about this question. That's why you're sort of halfway confused. What the hell are they doing, man, right? No, you need to identify the problem. That's why I called it a paradox or something else. I think I called it paradox in our discussion. So you need to get to this in order to start doing good metaphysics, right? And, you could get away with not doing metaphysics and live by this materialist metaphysics. It works. The problem is when you start to do epistemology. Then it starts to be a problem. And it for real becomes a problem when you're doing ethics, because you're basing that on your knowledge, right? And your knowledge is based on bad metaphysics, right? So it really starts to creak when you get down to a moral principle. It won't work because you screwed up from the ground floor, right?
Organisms, like single-celled organisms, know the difference between food and debris. So that they know what, quote, truth is, not in an abstract sense, of course, but in an experiential sense.
But is it true if I can stuff it in my face and it works towards my existence? Is it true then? So it's a sort of a weird understanding of true, right? True is when something is known, right? If you know something, it's true to you, right? You could say it that way, maybe, right? Maybe it's a lot of slightly twisted way of putting it. While I would say, well, if I point and say that's an elephant, right? I'm making a proposition. If you hear that proposition, you can look at that direction I'm pointing and say, true or false, right? You won't know if I'm actually lying. But if I'm pointing and you're experiencing elephant, it would be highly unlikely that I'm, lying. But you can't get to it because you can't experience my experience, right? But I'm making the proposition, and you will know whether that proposition is true to you, right? Because you have your experience, and you have my proposition. And when you're comparing the conceptual part of my proposition, which is elephant, with your experience, You know whether or not it's true or false. And that's knowledge, right? I'm handing it to you now, right? What am I doing, man? He should do the work himself.
Any animal that has failed to solve the problem of reality hasn't survived. So we're only here because...
No, but it's evolutionarily. The theory would be evolution, right? And you can dig up all sort of evidence for evolution. But it's still a theory. It's not knowledge, right? Those who ate something that didn't further their living existence, they died out because those who actually consumed that which worked towards that goal are the ones surviving. But it doesn't mean that they know it, right? It's sort of trial and error thing. This is all those who ate rocks, they were weeded out in evolution. Those who ate pears and whatever, right? Yeah, there's nothing about the pear that says it works towards your survival. There's nothing about it, but start to eat it and see if it works, right? If it works, so okay, I'm still alive, right? So yes, but everybody does that, in my opinion, right? That's an axiom. But in my opinion, I do that also. But it doesn't mean that I have knowledge of the function just because I have tried it and it works, right? It's not the problem whether or not it's a pear or a bicycle. That's not the problem, that is inherent in this question, or the problem that is inherent in this kind of thinking. The problem is that you experience the actual thing outside, or is it merely an experience in your mind and you do not have access to the actual thing, right? Now, in my opinion, if you start to think about it, right, there's no way around it. It can only at most be an experience of that outside you do not have access to. And I don't care about that thing outside I don't have access to, right? I don't care about it. I don't give a shit about it, right? It's unknowable. It's inaccessible. I can't get to it, right? Because I need to have an experience of it before I have anything to do with it, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't have anything, in my opinion, right? So why would I care about it? I can access it, so forget about it, right? Focus on your experiences. Just be aware that if I experience you, Stefan Molyneux, the real Stefan Molyneux is out there in that realm I do not have access to. I only have the experience of Stefan Molyneux in my mind, right? But that's not Stefan Molyneux. The actual Stefan Molyneux is out there beyond my experiences. Okay? That's the problem you need to deal with in order to get to knowledge. And most importantly, when you do ethics, right?
Because we've solved the problem of what is real. Anyone who doesn't solve the problem of what is real is not long for this world. Obviously, I mean, if they really commit to it, right? If they genuinely believe that nothing is real, if they walk off cliffs, they don't eat, they wouldn't get out of bed, why would you do anything, right? So we are the very best at solving this problem of what is real and what is not.
We are the very best? That's a relative statement. You're Mr. Absolute, right? Certainty, unchangeable, coherent. But the best is a relative term. Why are you talking relative, right?
That's why we became the apex predator of the...
And I might add, compared to what? Doesn't it compare to what you need to do with it? What does it matter if you're best at understanding that reality if your actions based on that understanding of reality doesn't function? So it depends on what your purpose is and how you rationalize about this experience, right? It's compared to something. If you're successful, it must be compared to something else.
Planet, we're the very best. Every single creature for 4 billion plus years that has survived and flourished has been able to solve this problem of what is real and what is not. And in fact, what is not real is merely training for what is real. Sounds like Israel. But
it's a lot of it's some. Yes, it's baby steps. They chew on everything and feel on anything and, do everything in order to understand this, and this works and this doesn't work and this works. When I put this rock in the mouth, it doesn't work, and when I put, apple pie in my face, it works. Okay, so it works, right? And the parents tell them what works and so on. Fine, that's not the fucking problem, man. Oh my God. It's not that people can't find food. It's obvious. When you look at people, they don't suddenly drive their car into the fields, and they follow along the roads because they know what that works, right? And they go to the grocery store rather than starting to chew on a fence or something like that. Everybody does it. I've never seen anybody, unless they were freaking crazy or something like that, right? Maybe I could dig on some experience that would point in the direction that people are. But then it's natural. Everything points in that direction. Stop babbling about this. It's because you don't understand what the problem is. I tried to point it out before, then rewind and try to understand it, right? So it's you're talking past the problem you're trying to solve because you don't understand what the actual problem is. You're jumping over it as if it's natural, but you don't identify it's inherent in your thinking. You have just accepted that's how it should be and is. So it's invisible to you. Maybe that's the way I should put it, right?
Training for what is real. A dog that dreams of hunting a rabbit is training for actually hunting a rabbit. That's why that training exists, so that he can practice hunting without expending too many calories. It's a form of efficiency, right? Your dreams are a way of educating you without you having to expend a lot of calories. Well, you certainly don't expend as many calories sleeping and dreaming as you would in your waking life, and particularly for predators dreaming about hunting prey. Hunting prey is hugely calorie consumptive. So we are the very best at figuring out what is real and what is not. We even have an abstract discipline called metaphysics to describe our giant-brained capacities.
No, metaphysics is not about differentiating what can be eaten and what can't be eaten, or what is real and what is not real, right? You are mixing your cognitions and your emotions and your ideas and abstractions with the experience. You're mixing it together. Keep them separate, right? Start with the experience. That's the approach. You shouldn't look at the colors and the sound and then compare it to, I can make up a square circle or something like that, or I can make up an 8-legged unicorn. Well, that's not the problem. That's not where the problem is. Yeah, there might be somebody mixing this stuff up, sure, but that's not the core problem. The core problem is identifying whether or not you experience the actual thing outside, or you don't merely have an experience of it, and there is an outside you can get to. That's the problem, right? That is the core problem. And you need to identify this in order to ever get to any decent philosophy, in my opinion.
This area. So, and I remember when, I can't remember exactly how old my daughter was, so she got object consciousncy. She knew the difference between sleeping and waking. And soon after she got some words, she talked about dreams, and she was very young and knew that they weren't real. So
I think this is where you start to ramble on all sorts of anecdotes and some that I don't remember as being very relevant to this kind of discussion. But then on minute 34, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's a caller question around this thing. There might be something before this that could actually... There might be something else. Let me just go to minute 30, 33, 34 here, and let's see what happens.
Visual search of extremities, because your nerves are shot, so you can't feel pain. So you have to do a visual search of extremities to make sure nothing cut you, bruised you, stung you, infected you, or anything like that, because you don't get that kind of feedback. So let's see here. Dear Steph, great metaphysics debate. Oh, metaphysics debate. That's a typo. The physics of math. What?
What? Metha is written. The caller says metaphysics, not metaphysics, right? There's also a complicated term.
Is conceptual consistency, and in what sense is it derived from sense data?
In what sense are they derived from the senses? It's difficult with these terms that are, describing philosophy of that which you are describing with the language that is used to describe that kind of reality that you have been accustomed to. So using, everyday terms in order to, it's difficult. There's a problem in philosophy there isn't actually a language for philosophy. People come up with all sorts of terms, but those are just terms that people don't understand until they are explained by the terms they already know, right? And then they will say, why are you not using those terms then? So it's sort of a problem with the language in philosophy. But I'm not dissing the caller here, right? The caller asks, okay, concepts, how are they sort of derived from the experience? That's a freaking very clear and concise question. Great question, man, right? Well, how it's done might be impossible to answer, but you could sort of try to frame it a bit, maybe, or try to get at it, right? How it's done within the mind. Who knows, right? Who can get to it, right? Who could get to that? Because it sort of goes on without you having any control of it and any insight into it. And usually, how does the mind sort of make sure that the heart keeps beating? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. How would I know, right? Because I only have the experience of that shell called my body, right? That is a mental representation of what is actually there. So I can never get to it, right? I can use all sorts of electrodes, but that's a mental, that's an experiential version of what is actually going on there, right? I can never get to it. In the same fashion, you can never get to, free will. You can't get to how are concepts actually being created, but you can make some correlations maybe, right? Which is, it seems to me that the awareness I talked of in the beginning, right, cognizes, as I would say, or identifies certain patterns in this experience and label it as a concept, right? There's this sort of, okay, this is elephant, for instance, right? It's sort of elephant. And it comes with a sort of a set of emotions and reactions and things that are built into this kind of concept, in my opinion. It just identifies based on a certain combination of sounds and colors and shapes and so on, right? Then it's sort of elephant. It's not saying elephant, or it's not, presenting it to it. It's just, it switches on and off, right? And the reason why the mind does that is I would think, or the way I approach it is, this conglomeration of labeling certain qualia as a concept gets me closer to the value I need to, or the value of the, you see, the energy or the value or the things I need to get to or avoid in order to further my survival, right? Elephant is, should I fight it? Should I fuck it? Should I flee from it? Or should I feed on it, right? Sort of 4 basics, right? The 4 F's: fighting, fleeing, fucking, and feeding, right? Should I fight it to kill it and maybe feed on it later, right? Or should I fuck it and not elephant, right? And should I flee from it in the sort of, no, don't fight it, flee from it, but otherwise you will become the dinner, right? Or should I feed on it? Should I just eat it, right? Maybe I should fight it and then eat it, right? But whatever, new situation, fighting, fleeing, fucking, feeding, right? Should I kill it and fuck it? Should I kill it and feed on it? Should I kill it and flee from it? You can make it up as you want, right? This is what you need to do with these concepts. You need to fighting, fleeing, fucking, and feeding, right? That's why you're conceptualizing things. Otherwise, it would just be a blurry of colors, sounds, and smells, and what would you use them for? But they're there in order for your mind to cognize things that you need to make some decisions on, right? And you use those decisions, channel them out in your free will, so to say, right? It's not that complicated, really.
Okay, so as an exercise, you can read that sentence 100 times. Do the words ever change? Do they suddenly flow into ancient Aramaic, or do they become wingdings or
What?
hieroglyphics or Braille, or I guess not Braille?
So it's just repeating the same question again and again and again and again. So if it doesn't change when you say it, it's because what? What does that explain your concepts, how they arrive from your senses? What the hell kind of stupid answer is this? Are you just kidding? What is going on? So you keep saying the same question. It doesn't change? No, it didn't change because I didn't change what I was going to say. But if I change what I'm going to say, it would be different. Would that disprove concepts or what? I simply don't get it. It's so lame, right? It's like, what the fuck are you saying, man, right? Is this supposed to be serious?
On a screen, but I'm sure there are Braille screens. There was a keyboard once that had raised edges on a tablet. So you can read that sentence over and over again, and it will not change. Right? So
But
atoms.
a sentence is a constructed label you put on certain sounds, right? So the sounds don't change. No, if you decide to make those sounds and they come out the same way as the previous sounds, I guess they didn't change. But it was because you didn't change them. I mean, what kind of what does that have to do with how concepts are sort of derived from experiences? I don't get it, man. I can't see the connection anywhere, right? It's like East and West, it's black and white, it doesn't hang together.
And the engineering that formed those sentences on the screen remained the same. In fact, you could take a screenshot of this, you could print it out, you could engrave it, and you could come back in 1,000 years or 10,000 years, and the sentence would be the same. I mean, you may not.
How the hell do you know what's going on in 10,000 years? A sentence, can you print out a sentence? You're talking, you're making a sound, and then I can print out the sound or what? Or the screenshot of your whatever here is going on, and then it'd be the same in 10,000 years. How do you know that? How do you have knowledge of the future? Well, you don't. You can reason about the future, but you can never reason yourself to knowledge, right? That's a very important thing you need to realize. You cannot reason your way to knowledge, right? You can have evidence, you can have theories, you can have hypotheses, whatever they're called, right? But that's not knowledge, right? That you reason your way to, if I eat that tomato, I'm going to be fat. That's good reasoning, in my opinion, right? But it's not knowledge before you have the actual experience of that which you call knowledge. And that's what you are also claiming in your limitation of knowledge, which is empiricism, right? You need to have the experience and also have knowledge. Well, then stick to it, man, right? So you in 10,000 years, you don't have experiences of what is going on in 10,000 years now, right? You only have, if you wait 10,000 years and have that experience, you can say that proposition is true or false. At that point, you have knowledge, right? Okay, maybe you're not talking about knowledge, but then what the hell are you talking about? Isn't it metaphysics is need to lead to knowledge? Otherwise, what are you babbling about then, right?
Be able to read it if language has changed too much, but the sentence would be the same. So just that particular, like I'll go back here and say, he says, did it scroll up?
I mean, no wonder that there seemed to be no one even remotely skilled in philosophy around him in this congregation of people. I mean, and those who are there, no wonder if they are freaking confused on another level, right? This is awful. It's not only bad philosophy, it's not philosophical, man, right? It's like people ask a question about bicycles, and then he starts to talk about his toothbrush or something like that, right? That's the level of argumentation in this case, at least, right? It's ridiculously, awfully bad, right? I don't get it. It's disconnected from the question completely.
Dear Steph, great metaphysics debate. Oh, and it still says metaphysics debate, right? What is conceptual consistency?
Did he write it again? What is he writing from the comments? And I don't know. Well, okay, metaphysics debate. He's still referring to that debate he had with me 2 weeks ago at time of doing this video, right?
And in what sense is it derived from sense data? Sense data is perfect.
Sense data is perfect. What do you mean by sense data? Now this is important, right? You're stepping away from that blank slate. Now you say you have data and you have senses and it's perfect. It's like, okay, hang on, mate, right? What is sense data? If you have a color, is that data? I'm experiencing red in that direction. Is that data? All I can say is it's red, right? So the senses, yeah, those I was talking about, like the eyes I can close and open, and the hand disappears and reappears as I do it, and so as I claimed before, you can do it yourself. But those calling that data is the same as saying, in my opinion, they come with a predefined idea of how they should be supposed to be understood. How could they possibly, how could you, even if they were, how could you have access to that understanding? If I experience red, what is data about it? What is the explanation, right? There isn't. Now we are not going into those cognitions, the elephant and so on, because he's talking about sense data. He's on the other side of experiences now. He's not on the cognitive side, or the inner side of the mind. He's talking about that sense that goes on before it becomes an experience. And then he says it's data. Data is something that has information to it, right? Data is observations that has information of some kind, right? Or at least could be assembled into some kind of information. But it doesn't. Even if it does, you couldn't point to it. You say there's blue and there's red and there's a square and there's, whatever. Yeah, you might interpret it in a way that you are accustomed to, that you call information, but that's on the other side. Those are the cognitions, right? When you experience elephant or you cognize elephant, right? That's when your mind says that's important, but it has only gotten to that point because of evolution. It's not because it came from the outside, right? It came from the inside. The mind has decided that that's important. Go for that elephant, or, go fuck that elephant, or whatever, right? Or I might change my mind, right? I'm aware of my crazy mind. Just kidding. It didn't come, that data didn't come from the outside. What you're referring to possibly is your cognition of it, and you call it valuable because it's valuable to know whether or not it's an apple or it's a rock, right? But rock and apple didn't come from the outside, man, right? Those were just colors that were eventually cognized into rock and apple, right? And by selection and trial and error, you can figure out, yes, it's the apple I'm eating. It's not the rock that I'm eating, right? Or should eat. You're confusing what comes from the senses and what comes from the inside.
Sense data is perfect. I mean, if it's not perfect, we know that something is wrong with our organs, right? So,
what the hell is he? Oh my God. How do, perfect is a weird kind of relativity, right? That's a relative term. Compared to all others is the best, right? And it can't even get better than that, right? That's a fucking, fantasy you're going for that. How the hell can you know what the senses are in relation to something else? Because you can't compare it to anything. If I'm experiencing red, how do I know that red is perfect? What the hell am I comparing it to? There's nothing beside it, behind it, whatever, anything. There's red. That's it. I can't compare it to anything. So how do I know it's perfect? Unless I tell myself in my freaky metaphysics, it is perfect. Right? Red. That red is perfect. That black is perfect. That, gray is perfect. That square is perfect. How the hell do you know it's a relative term? You can't know. There's nothing you can compare it to. You can only say, I'm experiencing red, right? I'm experiencing blue. I'm experiencing sound. I'm experiencing that. Yeah, I classify it as Stefan Molyneux sound and Stefan Molyneux color or apple color or whatever, right? Yeah, fine. That's cognitions. But those cognitions are not the senses, right? Those are not the experiences. Those are cognitions from the inside of that screen of experience, right? Beyond which you have no access to. So you can't know what the senses are doing. Those versions you have of your senses are on the inside. Those are not the real senses out there, so you can't get to what the hell they're doing, right? You can fabulate all you want about your photographs of that reality you don't have access to, but don't confuse them with the actual outside, because those are the photographs you have on the inside. No matter how you put them around, they're never going to be that thing outside, right? And you have no comparison to call it perfect. How dare you, man, confuse your listeners this way, right? You have no access to any judgment of that kind. You have no access to it. It's completely baloney, man, right? It's stupid.
If you can't hear, then it's not like...
But if you don't hear anything, are you saying, if I'm not hearing a, airplane now, is there something wrong with my ears? How would I know? I have nothing to compare it to. Even if I see an airplane, should I hear a certain sound or shouldn't I hear a sound? How would I know? Prior experiences can't tell me whether or not I should. I can say it's likely and I could reason that I should do it, but I can't say that I should be doing it or I shouldn't be doing, right? I could point out it's likely that when I would think that I should experience it. But if I see an airplane and I don't hear a sound, I can't say that it's something that's wrong with my senses, right? It could be likely, but that's just based on assumptions, right? That's based on prior experiences. Your prior experience can't tell you what you should know. That's a kind of reasoning, and reasoning can never be knowledge, right? Never. Reasoning is never knowledge.
The senses in philosophy and reality have suddenly changed. It's that your ears have stopped functioning or are under-functioning in some Pete Townsend.
I would say that fair enough. I would get my ears checked if I see an airplane come passing by closely and there were no sounds. I would think, and I see, smoke out of the, whatever, contrails and so on. There should be sound, right? I would try to get my ears, checked and so on and see, is there something wrong? Yeah, I get that. But then you're no longer with the airplane, right? 2 days later, you are at the doctor, and then there's no airplane. You can get back to the airplane and, right? So it's like, it's this, because I expect this to be the case, I am certain it should be the case, right? And therefore I know what is going to happen, right? You can't get knowledge that way. That's a violation of your own statement about you being an empiricist, right? You can't say, yeah, I had empirical data, I have memories of empirical experiences, and therefore I have knowledge in the now because I'm comparing it to a prior experience. That doesn't work, right? Because then you're saying the photograph of the moon is the same as the moon. That doesn't work, right? It's not empirical. Then you're basing it on reasoning, right? Fine if you want to do that. Be my guest. But just don't call it knowledge, right? You can't reason your way to knowledge.
Maximum R&B, way too many decibels in the 70s kind of way. I think both Pete Townsend and singer Roger Daltrey have to wear hearing aids because they just blew their ears out. And same thing happened with Huey Lewis. It blew out one of his ears in the 80s, and then his other ear got fried. And it's really tough for somebody so musically talented. So the senses are perfect, and the degree to which they're imperfect
They're perfect, but to the degree to which they're imperfect, you don't have anything to compare your senses to. So you can't say they're perfect because it's a relative term compared to something. Compared to what, right? No, there's nothing you can compare your senses to, right? Nothing. You can compare to your prior experiences, but those are not experiences. They are memories of prior experiences. You can't compare it to that. You're conflating two categories, right? You're violating good thinking, right?
is the degree to which we know they're not working correctly, right? So as I age, I need glasses, right? I didn't need glasses till I was in my 40s, but as I age, I need glasses, and I need a new prescription every couple of years. Not a big deal. It's just, always beats the alternative, right? Which is to be dead. But I don't go to the optometrist
To be
and
dead.
say, the world is getting blurry, you need to fix the world. Right? I say, oh, things are getting blurry, I need glasses.
How do you know? Yeah, but that's your reasoning. Fine, it's good reasoning. I would do the same thing. But you don't have knowledge of it, right? You don't have knowledge of it. It's simply something you can't know because you're reasoning towards something and you're making a qualified decision based on that reasoning and your prior experiences. What is usually the problem, and usually when things are blurry, is because your vision has grown incorrect, whatever, suboptimal, whatever, right? Fine, but that's not knowledge, right? Knowledge has to be based on your experiences, right? It's like if there's something that is blurry, it doesn't mean automatically that there's an explanation to it, right? You're just having blurry experiences. Yes, you are rationalizing that I believe most people do, and I do, right? Yes, that's the kind of reasoning we're doing. But reasoning is not knowledge, because reasoning is based on prior experiences, not and a combination with actual experiences, I suppose, right? But that doesn't explain the thing that you're trying to explain using reasoning, right? I'm getting a little tired here, getting deep into this. Maybe you should leave this alone for now.
Right, that's you don't say that the reality is getting blurry. You say my eyes are getting blurry, right? And just as they age, I think that the muscles don't.
But it's also again this. He keeps pounding on this, and he's talking past the actual problem that I was trying to describe to him. And I would guess that he this would be a different podcast. Let me tell you, if the penny had dropped. So I'm not going to think that I'm betting. I'm eating a straw at. If in this essay that he's apparently written is going to explain this exact problem I'm trying to, or identify it at least, and then say I'm not sure what to do with it, right? Which would be a good, skeptical way approach. And they say, okay, this is sort of a Copernican turn, right? I need to, get my things straight here and get rid of my habitual thinking, right? That's not what he's saying. So I bet you that essay is not going to explain anything. It is not going to identify the problem, and it's not certainly not going to explain the problem, right?
Tract as much or harden, or I don't know what it is, but something like that, right? So the senses are perfect. Now people say
that's an easy statement, right? The senses are perfect because you have nothing to compare it to, so he can state whatever he wants, right? It's just a bullshit statement. There's nothing to back it up with because there's nothing to compare it to, right? And he needs a comparison. Otherwise, you couldn't say perfect. Then you could just say it is. There are experiences. Calling it perfect needs to have something that is relative to, right? But there's nothing to compare your experiences to. Nothing.
Yes, but the senses can fool you. And it's like, no, they can't. They're merely passive organs of
But fooling, no. No, that's right. What is fooling, right? The sense is trying to, no, I'm going to, send another thing. No, I don't believe that either. But you can never get to that. You can never get to what the hell is going on out there, right? You can never get to it. So it's a stupid sort of statement. It's an I don't know statement what is going on, right? I'll just have to trust. I don't even have to trust. But I'm deciding I'm going with what I'm experiencing, right? And what I'm cognizing or conceptualizing, you could say maybe, right? If I experience elephant, I'm going to go with that elephant, right? No matter what you say, right?
Mission. Right? If somebody sends you a threatening letter, you don't blame the mailman. The mailman's just delivering the letter.
Maybe he wrote it, right?
So the senses are perfect. And the senses don't fool you. All they do is transmit information. Your mind will come to...
No. You can't call it information, right? It's like you already know what's going on before it becomes an experience. You have no access to that. And that's the problem. You're pointing out that you don't understand this, right? That's why you think it's such an obvious solution. You don't understand the paradox built into your thinking. You're saying I have access to that which is 100% perfect, of which I can have an experience that is slightly less perfect, right? Potentially slightly less perfect. How the hell do you get to that? Because you need to have that experience in order to talk about those senses, man, right? Why can't you fucking get this, right? Oh, man.
The conclusions about the evidence of the senses. But you can't blame the senses for that. I mean, you can, you'd just be wrong. Right? So if you're in a desert and you see what seems like a body of water in the distance, and you say, oh, that's a lake. Well, your eyes aren't telling you that that's a lake. The eyes are simply transmitting the visual information. Your conclusion that that's a lake is...
One thing that is paramount to this problem is that, paramount, I don't know if that's the right word to use, it's very hard to choose the right words to describe it so that people might get it, right? It's prone to using terms that people are going to say, wow, you're crazy, right? That's also one of the things that I think a guy like Immanuel Kant struggled with when he realized this inherent problem that apparently 99.9% of the world hadn't realized, right? How do I go about explaining this to people, right? Because they don't even understand there is a problem. They don't even identify the contradiction or the paradox, right? So how do I go about explaining it to people so they will say, oh yeah, I can see what you mean. How the hell do you do that, right? He came up with the noumena and the phenomena and, certain, and that maybe just confused people even more, right? There was what the hell is he talking about? Another realm? Is this like, a bubble somewhere out on the outer space or what the hell are you talking about? So no. Everything you experience is not the thing itself. And so what? Is that cat not a cat? Yes, it's a cat, but it's not the real cat. It's like, no, yo, you are fucking crazy. And when you on this side where you understand this is what he's trying to explain, it makes sense to you, right? Because you understand the problem in explaining that which people haven't identified. And they see it from their point of view, and then it sounds fucking crazy, right? I can see that. I can be empathetic about it. Because now I understand the problem. I can see how it's futile or your futility of explaining it sometimes, right? That no matter what words you choose, it sounds like you're crazy.
In your mind, it's not the fault of the eyes. The eyes are what do the eyes do? They correctly process light entering the cornea, right? And transmit it to the brain.
The brain is also an experience, right? That which the mind is inside that which you experience inside your mind, right? So you're saying the mind is inside something, but in order for me to experience that which the mind is inside, that experience has to be inside the mind. How do you square that? Well, it's because what you refer to the brain is not the actual thing. It's the mind's presentation of it, right? It's saying, yes, yes, this is my best guess at what it is. And I call that mind, right? Go with it.
And it is certainly true that you see something shimmering and reflective in the distance. Now, the fact that that's light bouncing between differently heated layers of air, that's science and all that, but your eyes are not, a mirage is not your eyes deceiving you. The eyes are perfectly transmitting exactly what they're supposed to do, which is...
You don't know what they're supposed to do. You don't know what they're supposed to do. How do you know? Do you have some manual somewhere that you can go and look? This is supposed to be. No, you don't. You don't have that access, man, right? That is fucking crazy talk. That you have some manual when you can go and say, oh, this is correctly identified by my senses. That is fucking crazy, right? And this is dangerous also because if you think you have that access, when people state something else than you state, you think that they're crazy. And in the end, you're going to say, well, who gives a crap about these people, right? No, final solution, right? I'm not saying you're going to say that, but that's the slippery slope of this kind of thinking. Be very careful with this. Be very aware of this, right? At least idealism makes you gives you a sort of a humility about your own insights, right? Where you say, okay, I can't know that. I can know this, I can know that. Now, this guy is on the opposite camp. I know everything. It's 100% perfect, right? And you're crazy if you say something else, right? That's a much different kind of approach.
Light entering your retina, cornea, whatever, light entering your eyes. Perfectly valid. Perfectly accurate.
Perfectly accurate? Where does he have that? What does he have that relative comparison from? His prior experiences. Well, what upgraded those? If you go back in a recurrence, or what's an infinite recurrent, right? Regression. Sorry. So you have to have an experience in order to justify this experience. But if you didn't have that justification of that first experience, right? How can you use that to justify this experience? Well, what justified that experience? Well, some earlier experience, and there's some earlier experience, and an earlier experience. The infinite regression of knowledge, right? It doesn't work. You should be able to see this. Another thing you can't even identify, right?
If you tell someone to misspell a word and they obey you, is it their fault that the word is misspelled? Let's say you threatening them.
What's a fault? So now we're talking about faults in metaphysics. This is a metaphysical question, isn't it? I mean, you might discuss whether or not it's epistemology when we're dealing with extracting concepts from experiences. It's on the borderline, right?
Or something to misspell a word, right? Well, no, it's your fault. You caused.
Fault is this sounds like virtue or ethics or something like that, right? So he jumps through. Now I'm going to talk about this. He's not even preparing you, saying, okay, now I'm going to talk about this because I need to, because of this and this and this. No, he just rambles left and right, and whatever comes into his mind, he's just going to spurt that as if it's great philosophy. Holy shit, it's not good philosophy. Let me tell you that.
If you have tinnitus in your ears, tinnitus, is there a mosquito trapped in your ear? No.
How do you know? Yeah, if you know it's tinnitus, but how do you know? How do you know that the tinnitus didn't expire for some reason that you can't explain? And then you actually have a mosquito roaming around in your ear. Well, what would it take to know? It's like, okay, I experienced tinnitus for a couple of weeks, and now every sound in my ear like that is tinnitus. Yes, I understand the reasoning. That's fine. That's decent reasoning. All things considered in your description, right? But it's not knowledge. And that's what we need to go for when we're doing metaphysics, right? Not in metaphysics, but the metaphysics needs to be settled so we can do epistemology later and get to knowledge, right? Metaphysics maps out where knowledge is possible, right? And it also maps out, you can say, there are things that you can't access. If you should realize whether or not there are aspects you can't access, as I pointed out, the things themselves that you can't get to, right? Then there are things that are always the case, right? You don't need knowledge, an idea of knowledge for those that are all things that, I'm not saying that are, but you could classify, you could say, if you're going to make classes for everything, then there are three things here, right? There are things you can access, there are things that are always the case, and there are things that are sometimes the case. I would say that the part of the metaphysics you map out, which are those that can be the case, those are the aspects that can be known, right? That's what you need to go for in metaphysics in order to say, okay, now I'm heading into epistemology with the things that can be the case, but not always are the case, right?
Usually that's, I don't know, some sort of sign of hearing loss and your brain's overcompensating or something like that. But you don't sit there and say, there's a mosquito trapped in my ear, or there's an invisible mosquito constantly buzzing around my left ear or my right ear or both ears if you have it in both ears. You don't say that. You say, oh, I have tinnitus, that's an issue within the hearing and all that, right? So the senses are perfect. Now,
okay, I fucking hate that, man. The senses are perfect, yeah, because you say so, right? And everybody else's senses are perfect, unless, if of course, if they're not perfect, then they're not perfect. Otherwise, they're perfect. Oh man, it's bad, right?
The senses aren't infinite. We can't see infrared, but so what? That doesn't mean anything.
So they're not perfect then. But why wouldn't I want to see infrared? I mean, maybe there's a reason why I can't. There's a good reason, possibly. Well, it has been weeded out in evolution. But it would be more perfect if I could see sort of Wi-Fi signals and radars, and wouldn't it? Oh, but what do you mean by perfect? Is it optimized? Is it optimized towards the goal, right? Is that what you mean by perfect? That's not the same. Perfect is not. Perfect is everything all the time, basically, something like that. Optimized is I only have what I need to go to my goal, right? So what do you mean by perfect? It's just a weird kind of philosophy, this. It's really strange and dangerous, in my opinion. And this leans up against the idea of certainty, right? It leans up against the idea of certainty because he desperately needs this certainty in order to stand up and say, I have created the holy grail of philosophy, right?
I mean, the fact that I can't reach something on the top shelf doesn't mean I can't reach something on the middle shelf. I don't have any height at all. The fact that the senses aren't infinite, again, a way that...
But infinite? What do you mean senses are infinite? That's also a weird sentence construction. Senses can't be infinite. Infinity is an abstraction that says you can keep counting, adding one is, if I count to 2, I can count to 3, I count to 3, I can count to 4, and so on. You can add 1 all the time. That's infinity, right? You can't talk about the senses are infinite. It's a malfunctioning sentence, in my opinion.
It's a very silly trick. I'm not saying anybody in this call is doing that, but it's a very silly trick to say...
Oh, the caller is... Are you talking about me as the caller? Or are you talking about that guy asking the questions on concepts and senses? So I'm going to go with that you are actually referring to me.
I'm going to have an impossible standard of truth and therefore say everything is false because it doesn't meet that standard.
Oh, so now you're trying to frame me as being sort of everything is relative, so I can make everything true and false as I see fit. So I'm out to destroy your sense of reality, so I can just say, no, I'm right all the time because I can do whatever I call true and call false and whatever I like. That's what he's trying to do, you piece of shit, man, right? He never got to any philosophy that could illuminate him on my stance on these things because he kept babbling about things that didn't have to do with what I was trying to get to, right? And in an ordered manner, possibly, potentially getting to these questions and answering them in a decent manner that were based on prior agreements in philosophy, right? Or in our discussion. So he's not, he's like this and he is like that, and be careful with these crazy people, right?
Like the metaphysics thing, which is you can't know anything unless you know absolutely everything about an object, inside and out, every atom, every electron, every proton, every neutron, every quark and stuff.
No, but no. I never said anything like that. We were not even remotely close to discussing these things. He's just lumping me in together with other crazy people he has apparently met, and they say he's just like them, right? But he never got to that kind of philosophy. He never did that kind of philosophy, as far as I can recall, right? Not in any way I would call coherent, at least, right? No, that's why you have the concepts, right? When you experience elephant, then you are experiencing elephant, right? And then you have sort of ideas, what do I usually do when I experience elephant? Do I fuck it? Do I fight it? Do I flee it? And so on, right? You don't need to, because you already have that experience of elephant or that cognition of elephant. You don't need to delve any deeper in order to verify it's an elephant, because you have the fucking cognition of elephant, right?
Atomic, whatever, right? Well, that's an impossible standard of knowledge, and it's just silly. It's like saying human beings are two-dimensional unless they're 40 feet tall. Well, human beings could never be more than 10.
Oh man, why am I doing this to myself, right? He's creating all these sort of weird arguments that sort of has, you could say that they have a sort of philosophical air to them, right? And then just slamming it all together and talking about it for an hour, 20 minutes and say, I solved it, right?
10 or 12 feet tall, because then every time they'd walk, they'd break their femur. So saying human beings don't exist because human beings aren't 40 feet tall. I mean, that would, you go to a, I always think of the...
I might just, he keeps rambling on and gears himself up to be sort of angry and, this angry speech, right, that he does. He sort of starts slow and then escalates into, yelling at the skies, right? And about, and then it's sort of, now I've done it. Okay, it won't, he says, it won't get any better than this speech, right? This is the best I can do. I've done it. This is the number 9th grail I've, invented. So I'm getting tired. I must admit, 1 hour and 40 minutes into this. But I have spent 10 minutes on him, right? Okay. So I might, 40 minutes and 12, maybe I'm getting into a bit more of this later. There's a lot, but it's basically, as far as I remember, the same thing he's keep pounding on, right? And clearly he doesn't understand the problem I was trying to get him to understand in this debate he's referring to, right? That I did a deconstruction of that, a 5-part deconstruction as far as I remember, that you can go listen to, or the original thing that we did. And I think I will leave it here so far. And maybe I'll dig into it later if I have the energy, right? So 1 hour and 40 minutes. I think I can't do any more today. I need to get some dinner. And then I will also be looking forward to that essay he is referring to, and see if I can do something about that, right? I'm not having high hopes, but let's see, right? Otherwise, please share, like, and subscribe, and come join the Discord and discuss these things and other funny stuff that might be going on there. And consider a donation. There are links and ways to donate through my Discord server. Go visit, please. Otherwise, have a nice day. See you next time.